Okay, we're going to work on this young lady and see if we can bring some more dimensionality to the picture, and we'll do some other stuff while we're at it. So mostly we want to talk about the face. So let's zoom in on the face a bit. And even in this picture, besides being a little out of focus and soft, her face appears flat. And she has, I'm sure, much more dimensionality than that. So we're going to go about fixing that. And these are the steps I made. But the first thing I did was took the rasterized copy of my Adobe Camera Raw inputted, which is a smart object, and I rasterized it because I don't need to go back to change that. So it's just a little bit less overhead. And from that, I made a copy. So Command or Control J makes a copy. And what I want to do is sharpen it. So I'm going to use the unsharp filter, sharpen, unsharp mask, and I'm going to set the amount to 10, and I'm going to set the radius to 10, which gives me a fairly good size sharpening amount, and I've kept my threshold to 0. So click OK. Well, that definitely did sharpen that up a bunch. So what we want to do is have it only be on the face. So I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key, click on the mask to get myself a black mask. And then what I'm going to do is paint with white, and I'm going to make my brush bigger and make sure it's soft. And then I'm just going to paint in her face. Okay, I'm going to hold down the Alt or Options key, and I'm going to click on the mask so we can see where it is. And here I can fix up anything that I missed over. I'm just painting over on the mask now. Another way we could do that is click back to here. Yes, click on the mask and then hold the backslash key. That's the one next to the bracket key. And we can see here where we've done it also. And that's not quite what I want. So let's go ahead and add some more white paint. And I want to paint over here because I do want all of her face in. And all of her forehead. And probably this first set of hair. Okay. So that already has brought her face forward. I'm going to repeat that process several times. And with each one, I'm going to add more sharpening, which is to say, I'm going to take this layer now. I'm going to take the layer that we just did. I'm going to use our stamp visible. That's Shift, Alternate, or Command, and the letter E. So that makes a composite of that. I'm going to sharpen it again. I come up here to Filters, and my unsharp mask is already in place. So I'm just going to click on that, and that'll apply another sharpening to the entire image. I'm going to put a mask on that. And once again, I'm going to make it a black mask. So I'll hold down the Alternate or Option key, click on the mask button. And in this time, what I'd like to do is with my white brush, I want to sharpen the eyes and the nose and the mouth. Okay, I'm going to hold down the Option or Alternate key again, click on it so I can see the mask. So I have a mask of that. And see how that sharpened up her eyes just a little bit more? All right, I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to hold down Command, Alternate Option, and the letter E. I'm going to come back up here to my filter. I'm going to apply the on-sharp mask one more time. Click. I'm going to hold down the Option or Alternate key, hit my mask to make a black mask. I'm going to take my white brush, and this time I'm just going to paint her eyes and maybe her mouth. Okay, so let's see how that looks. 1, 2, 3. So there she is. Face is a little sharper. Eyes a little sharper. Nose and mouth a little sharper. And then what I decided to do is to add a new adjustment layer. So what is that adjustment layer? I brightened, and to get this spot, I used the range and brought it over a spot and said I wanted to lighten up this area in here around her eyes. So I just clicked on that spot and raised it a little bit. And then I put a mask on it because I was only interested in those dark parts of her eyes. Okay. And then just to gild the lily, I used the super sharpening action I gave you to really sharpen up her eyes. See that? Just really pop that up. We just cross these out, so we're working with the same ones that I did. And what was the last thing I did? I came in here and I did a hue and saturation adjustment, and I just brought the saturation down a little bit because I thought she'd gotten a little bit intense for this process. All right, so that's the face mask. So then we're going to jump over this part and come back to it. Then what I did was I made a stamped visible of all the corrections I had made so far, and I simply did a mask by using up the subject with a mask, clicked on that, and refined that mask to create the mask you see there, which gave me the girl with her background. And what I did at this point then is I turned off these other layers. I don't need them anymore. And I have her on a background. And let's go up and see all of that with the background material taken off. But you can see that the masking missed part of her hair. And I went back to try and refine that, and that just became a lot of work. So we're going to fix that in a second. But to get the piece I'm going to work on next, at this point, I did our merge visible. And now I have a layer that is just the girl on the wall without any background. So what bothers me the most next? Well, the thing that bothers me the most next is her hair. So what did I do? I created a brush of some locks of hair, and I just painted them on. So, and you can see that this brush has wisps of hair kind of following the same look as her hairdo. So I did that hair on the right side, and I used the same brush and just manipulated a little bit. I put it on the left side. So I now have some strands of hair simulating what she had. And then because she has all of these various colors and tones in there, I did some clone stamping. So I took some, so I added some hair and feathering there, and then a little bit more and a little bit more. So now I have some texture down in here. And then I placed that image of the girl that I had on top of it. So now I have some hair. And in those places where the color difference isn't going to make that much, I have a color in here that is close enough. So that's how I fixed her hair. While I was at it, let's zoom back out a little bit here. While I was at it, I felt that her dress was kind of getting lost in the whole procedure. I put a curve on it, and that's just on the dress. And what did it do? It added some lightness. Because it's so steep in here, it sharpened and gave us more contrast in the dress itself. So that's the dress and the hair to that point. And the next part that bothered me was the eyes. So I clicked up here to the eyes, and boy, did I get carried away there. So what did I do for the eyes? The first thing I did is I whitened the eyes. I just made a mask and I painted in some white or just off-white, and then just brought it up enough that it brightened the eyes up a little bit. That's to get rid of all that deep darkness. So I added a color layer, painted the eye with the blue color that I picked, like so, and just modified that with opacity and used a mask for the fine detailing of it. Then I added in a couple of catch lights, and then I kind of felt that the shadow on the right eye was a little intense, so I created a painting layer here. So let's do this again. I simply painted in by selecting around the eye with some color, and that gave me the eye colors, and then I brightened it just a little bit, just a touch. So that gave me some eye color. Let's go back and look at this. So I think she's looking better. Actually, I think she's looking a lot better. So what do I want to do now? And I think what I want to do now is I want to put a background on it. So I'm going to turn these off. and I'm going to bring in a texture pattern like so, and then I'm going to put her back on top of it. And that all by itself looks better. And so how did I do that? I used the selection that I had done to cut the girl out, which is the basis of my girl on wall and the eye detail, and then imposed it on top of the background. I'd like to get some color in there, so I made a color fill there. See, I took the opacity down to 92%, which I think gave us a nice color. What's the nice thing about this technique is I can double click here on the color and I can make it pretty much anything I want it to be. I can change the saturation of it. I can change it to more of a rose or a pink color. Oh, that's kind of fun. Or maybe because she's got the blue eyes, I could add a little bit more blue into it. Well, I think I like that. It kind of goes with the rock wall below. Okay, we'll keep that one. So this allows me to change my background color hue, and I'm using the texture layer and I have it in luminosity mode. So it simply is affecting the luminosity of the color below it, which gives me a nice background. So what do I need to finish this baby up? Well, we're going to go back to my favorite trick, seeing how we know the eye is led to whatever's bright and to whatever's sharp, whatever has the most contrast. I'm going to make a curves adjustment layer. Let's just go ahead and do that. We'll come back up here. I'm going to create a curves adjustment layer. I'm going to brighten the image, and then I want to decide where it is do I want it to be bright. So I'm going to use the lasso tool, and I'm going to say what I want to be bright is that area there. So I flubbed up here a little bit. I have the add-on to it. So I'm going to click on here, and I'm just going to come outside here and grab some more of that color. And that increased my mask. Okay, so I have a mask. I'm going to get rid of this old mask. I have that selection in place. I'm going to put in a new mask. See, I was doing that whole dark background, but you can see the line. See here where it changes, and I don't like that. So I'm going to click on the mask, and I'm going to bring the feathering up to a point where you just can't see that anymore, which is about right about there. So that gives me my mask. And then I did the same thing. I made a darkening layer, made a mask in the opposite direction, and made a vignette around her. So there you go. Now, that's what we've got now. That's where we started. Before, after, before, after, before, after. It's a neat technique. So enjoy. We'll talk again soon. So this is my dad. We took him down. He was in a facility at this point and had him and my brother, and we all went out to lunch, which should have been fun, but not so much.
No. Interesting.
So there's my dad, and it was a group picture, and I think the camera ended up focusing on my brother. So I had to work on it to try to
Right.
revive it. So the first
Right.
thing I did was I fixed the glasses and the eyes. So let me show you what that looks like. Because I took it in the order of how it needs to work. So if I click on that, I just rebuilt the eyes. I looked at the image, and remember, I am a proponent of going to what bothers you the most and working your way down from there. Fix the glasses. The next thing that bothers me is this background because it's interfering with them. So what I did is I blurred the background and see how I darkened the window behind him.
Yeah. You do that just with Gaussian blur?
I did a Gaussian blur, and I think at some point I a curve on it, but that seemed to have gotten lost in translation.
So did you do select subject and then do inverse, or did you select background?
And I think I picked him with the quick selection mask because his
Oh, okay.
shirt fades into the thing, and it was the face here. So if you look at the mask,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right.
okay, and then what did I do? Is I decided here that I thought this side of his head and his ears still stuck out too much. So I did is I just darkened and blurred them a little bit, and that's a gray addition to the mask that we had before to bring his ear in just a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. And then here, all I did here was did a stamp visible so that I wouldn't mess around with this stuff as we went later. And then I did that same technique
With the high pass filter.
with the high pass filters. So there's the first one, and then some more, and then some more. And I put them all in a group so that I could turn them on and off and mess with them. So if we look at them, the first one here, we click on it. So it's in soft light. Once again, I could have made it hard light. See how it makes a difference?
Yeah.
And I have a mask because I'm just doing his face in general. But I've left the opacity all the way up. On the next one, if we look at the mask on that, here I'm doing the eyes, mouth and nose part.
Mhm.
And then up in here, I want to get some more sharpening yet on the eyes and mouth. So now if you look at it, his
Mhm.
face actually does tend to jump out from the picture.
Yeah, well,
the
certainly his eyes do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's the thing. So the idea is he doesn't look as flat. You know, he
No,
looks like he has some dimension here.
yeah.
Um,
Huh.
so in here, I looked at it afterwards and said, these shadow lines from the bifocals, they're realistic, but they don't seem to help anything for me. So I just took those out and I used
Yeah,
I use this tool here to do that.
yeah, that's a good call.
Okay, because it doesn't add or detract. It just,
Right.
gives you something else to stare at.
Mm.
Then I went
Yeah.
back to that trick that I like so much about lightening up what the subject is. And that's simply done with a curve that's raised up just a little bit. And then I put a mask on it and I put a blur on it. And here instead of using the Gaussian blur, I use the blur or feather routine that comes as a way to change the properties. And I brought it up here to a lot.
Hmm.
So that's just
Wow.
a faster way to, let's see, this is what it looked like. You see the lining. So there's the line, and then this is the fade
Yeah,
across there.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
And I did the exact same thing now with the darken curve. There's the
Mm.
darken curve. And I would adjust, and I click on this, did the same thing. I brought it up the same level of blur so that it fades more in the background, which
Mm.
means I now have him pretty well cleaned up. He is clearly what I want you to
Oh,
look at.
gosh, absolutely.
So this is where the brightest part is.
Oh, yeah.
Then
Yep.
there's a fade here to darker, and then from here you get into the darkest. So there's a
This-
fade across the side of his head. So you're not focusing out on the side of his skull. You're looking at his face.
Right. Yeah,
There's
and you didn't
Spot under
use,
his nose, Richard, did you end up getting rid of that?
Getting rid of what?
There's a spot under his nostril.
Right here, this down here?
Yep.
I could have.
Mm.
I didn't for this exercise, but
Okay.
I should.
it's,
And I
am-
would, go
it's
ahead.
amazing how much brighter his face is without you using contrast or
Yeah.
highlights or
But
lowlights or
that's where it
anything.
happens right there.
Yeah, it's really cool.
But you can
Now,
see,
hold on.
go ahead.
How is it that those two masks don't cancel each other out? Those curves.
Well, let's
One's
see.
highlights, one's lowlights.
On one, yeah, but on one, but
Okay.
do they have the same, did you use the same,
I drew two separate
Face?
circles. I do two
oh,
separate
they're two
circles.
separate- okay, and they're not identical.
No, they're not. So
Okay,
so here's
Yeah.
here's the picture of him.
right?
So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put on a curves adjustment layer.
Yep.
Curves right here. And I'm going to brighten his face, and let's exaggerate. I'm going to brighten it like so.
Oh,
Right.
that's where the brightening is, of course.
Okay. And then
Right.
what I do is I
right.
take the lasso tool, that's this one here.
Yeah.
I take the lasso tool and I say, what do I really want bright? Well, what I really want bright is not the top of his head.
No.
I want it somewhere in here,
No.
probably somewhere
Oh.
around in.
Oh, that's good you showed us that.
Okay, so there's where I want it bright.
Yeah.
All right. So what I do is I'm going to get rid of the mask, delete the mask, and now I'm going to put a mask in. So there's a mask. So there's the bright part. So see
Yeah.
his
Right.
face
Yeah.
is the brightest. So now what I want to do is I want to come over here to the mask. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the feather and I'm going to move the feather up
Mhm.
Huh,
so that you don't see
wow.
where that happens. So now this part is
Wow.
bright and then it gets less bright going back, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I'm done with that. I'm gonna do now is
Hmm.
I'm gonna make another curves adjustment layer. Curves.
Hmm.
This one I'm going to darken.
Yeah.
So it darkens the whole photograph.
Huh.
So I'll get rid of this mask because I don't need it. I'm going to take the lasso pulled against this. Well, where do I really want it dark? Well, I think I probably would like to have it dark, but I think maybe his whole face. And it's not a perfect one. It's just kind of a guess there. I'm going to put a mask on there. If I hold down the alternate or the option key, click on it and click on the mask.
That just put, oh, okay, puts a
That-
mask on that.
Yeah, so it makes the black on the outside. So you can still have that terrible line.
Yeah.
So I double click on this. I'm going to take my feather again and bring it way the heck up here.
Huh.
Yeah, maybe there.
Wow.
So
Okay,
now
I
there
get
he is. He's clearly the subject. You know, his head is obviously part of him. I want you to see that in his shirt. But the
Mhm.
face right here is what you're drawn to because it's the brightest. Now let's think about that. We know that the eye is going to go to whatever's brightest.
Yeah, of course.
The eye is going to go to whatever is sharpest, right? And we
Oh,
could add more color to him if we wanted to, you know, because it'll go to where the color is too in the contrast. So we have, without us being aware of it, said, this is what's important. This is what's next important. And then this here is what's least important.
yeah.
So it's a portrait of a man and he's got color issues going on. So this is the final one that I did because it's not quite as obvious. And this would be a case to see, do you like it in black and white?
No, I like the color.
Yeah, I like
I
the
think I favor the color.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
It's more, it's more interesting.
So, but that's one heck of a trip
Mm.
Mhm.
from that.
Oh, that's a
Yeah.
great lesson, Richard. That's a great lesson.
Thank you for
Mhm.
sharing.
Okay.
Yeah,
And-
really.
And all of this can be done, you know, more subtly. I mean, obviously I'm doing things
Yeah.
fairly
Yeah, yeah.
fairly large for you to see.
Oh, that is really remarkable. The applications for that are
Pretty much
tremendous.
endless, yeah. Let's look at this one, for example. So in here, what I did is, this is one of my shots from Chile, and this is natural. This is kind of like a waterway that goes between the mainland
Yeah.
and the barrier islands. All right, so here's how the camera took the photograph. So that's how it came into Lightroom without any additions. And this was shot at an ISO of 400. And with all the hype, you would have think it would have been nigh on to perfect, but obviously it wasn't. So I tried just correcting it in Adobe Camera Raw. So I adjusted it for the lens that I was using and the camera that I was using, and I brought back to the noise to the point that I was afraid that I'd be losing too much detail. Okay, so that's what Adobe Camera Raw gave me. Then I put it into DxO, and all I did in DxO was used for adapting it to the lens and camera I used and their premium denoise algorithm, and that's what they did.
Hmm.
So Adobe Camera Raw, DxO.
Oh, wow.
Quite different. Yeah.
Well,
Wow.
Richard, was that DxO Deep Prime?
Yes.
Okay.
That's really, harsh.
Significant.
Yeah, like it's harsh compared to the other one.
Deep Prime is great.
Well, you can see, I mean, first off, because of the lenses and the camera body studies are where they made their money and their name, this is adapted towards any fall off or aberrations or problems that my lens and body have in common. And this is not using the world's best lens. This is using probably their worst telephoto that I use, and I use it for traveling. It goes 28 to 300. So, you know, I just thought that was remarkable enough
It is remarkable.
Yeah.
So it's just DxO? You said deep prime.
Well, Deep Prime is, they have 4 different denoising algorithms that you can pick from.
All in
So-
one package?
Yeah.
In
Okay.
DxO.
Now,
They've-
have you put it against the Adobe denoise?
Not yet. No, that wasn't the Adobe, right? No, that is,
That is the Adobe.
that
I mean,
is the
sorry,
Adobe.
I mean the
Photoshop.
Topaz.
You mean
No,
Topaz?
I didn't do the Topaz on this one, only because I was trying just to get this question answered. But that's the
Yeah.
difference in the overall. I mean, it's just night and day.
I'd love
Right.
to see the comparison with Topaz, which most of us have.
Well,
Mhm. And,
don't-
and do it with Topaz AI and Topaz
Yeah.
denoise.
And
Well, let me
what
do-
about Topaz photo?
Yeah, that's
AI?
what I meant. Yeah.
The new
photo
one, the
AI
new one.
And
Photo
denoise.
AI.
Yeah,
I can
photo
do that
AI
for,
and denoise.
I'll do the same picture with that for next time.
Okay,
So
So
we-
that
Richard,
would be
was
really
that,
great.
was that DxO Photo Lab 5 or a, and one
Photo
of
Lab
the
6.
6? Okay.
Photo
that
Lab
means I need
6.
to update. Okay.
Now, is that a monthly charge for them too, or is
Nope,
this a?
That's, you
one-time
pay for it
purchase
and you
and
got
then-
it.
Right, but then when you have to pay for the updates.
And they do have sales.
Yes, they
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Now, this comes in, they have 2 packages. They've also got one that they call DxO Raw.
Yeah.
And the DxO Raw does exactly what this one does, in that it does your lens correction to body correction, and it does the denoise function, which is why I put it in here. I did not buy that one, and that can be done as an automatic on all of your pictures. I didn't do that because I already had an earlier version, one of the earliest versions of their photo
Mhm.
lab, and it came with a discount. And Tyndall is a Scott name.
Yeah.
You had to
I-
take that discount.
We know that. We know that.
So I just thought that was what a wonderful place to start working, as opposed to trying to
Yeah.
bring that other stuff back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
one thing,
amazing.
Richard, that I found, at least in looking at different photographers' opinions, that DxO6 did not necessarily present a convincing case for upgrading from DxO5 if you have 5.
Yeah,
So
but I
that's-
started from DxO Photo Lab 1, so that was
Oh,
a
big
convincing
difference, big
case.
difference. Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a no-brainer.
yep. But I've got 5, and I've
Oh,
held off so far on 6.
Yeah.
Just
Mm.
because I don't know that it's going to be a huge difference. Plus, I have all the topaz, so I
Right.
can go back and forth.
Yeah.
with-
Yeah,
If
and,
you-
and I do too. What I like about the DxO is that this came back in as a DNG file. So
Yes.
Yeah,
Photoshop treats it like a raw picture,
Yep, exactly.
which I
But-
like a lot.
doesn't
That's nice.
the photo, Topaz Photo AI do that now too?
I don't use Photo AI. I do sometimes use the denoise.
No, they've
Um,
got that new thing.
Yeah, I have photo AI and it does, both sharpen
it-
and
it-
denoise at the
Yeah.
same time.
Does it-
Yeah,
as DNG files.
Yeah.
I think so, yes.
It'll do it
TIFF.
as a TIFF if you want.
TIFF, that, I thought it came in as a TIFF.
I think it can do
Well,
DNG too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it,
but
it
there-
can do your raw, it'll do your raw, because I can import right from like my from my Canon
Yeah,
raw.
but it has to do with how it saves it. That's
Yeah.
Exactly.
see, that's
It's
from-
a saving.
As a TIFF.
well, if you bring it as a TIFF, then it is already a Photoshop file is a TIFF file. It's just a modified one. If I can bring it in as a DNG, I can do all that non-destructive editing in it.
Yeah,
And I'm working on the pixel. Herein lies the difference that we have to keep in our mind, is that Photoshop, for all of its many wonderful things, is still basically a pixel editor that when we use these adjustment layers down here, and it comes in on top of something else, we're playing with the mathematics, but it's still a pixel-based editor. And you run the chance of it creating artifacts and things on the image. When you bring it in as when you're working in the raw category, and that would be like with the DxO or with Adobe Camera Raw, you're not doing anything to the pixels. All you're doing is doing the instructions as to how to interpret them. For example, we can say yes, ja, or si. All 3 mean exactly the same things, provided you know that they're different languages,
Right.
right? So those are an interpretation, but the basic meaning, affirmative, did not change with any of the three of them. That's what a camera raw editor does. It simply changes the interpretation, not what
Okay.
not what the thing is. When we're
Okay.
starting to deal in here, especially when we start doing the destructive parts of Photoshop, we actually change the pixels.
Hmm.
So a lot of things are better done on that level because you're not messing with what the original pixels were. So it means you're going to get less artifacts. And somewhere in here today's demonstration, I have an artifact picture to show you, so we can make sure we're starting to understand what that's about. So anyway, yes.
Richard, when you use DxO, so do you just open DxO and bring the picture into there and then save it?
Or send it
Or-
back to Photoshop?
Or do you open it in Photoshop?
Actually, I open it in Lightroom. I take my image because I use Lightroom as my launching pad. I take an image from Lightroom and I send it to DxO. I work it works its magic, and I bring it back into Lightroom and then pretend it's a brand new raw file. You can also work with it on the outside and not go through Lightroom at all and run it through Bridge.
Yeah, I
So,
don't use Lightroom, so I can.
I don't
can do
either.
that with Bridge.
I do.
well, I'll get you converted eventually.
Well, so you think that we should be doing that, Richard, do you?
I find the fact that it stores my photograph for me and it forces me to follow a routine is better
But I don't
discipline.
like the routine.
Well, I understand that, but it's like I don't want a brain surgeon making it up as he goes along. And
I'm the brain surgeon that wants to put it where I want it.
I hear that, and you can do that. It just says you can do whatever you want as long as you tell me what you did. I don't care if you run around, just let me
No,
know.
I know what I did. Lightroom, I don't know what it does.
That's fair.
Or
But-
it does a great job. I love it.
Yeah, but
It puts it by dates. And
Yeah.
I can't,
Yeah.
I don't like dates first because
you don't
I
have
don't
to,
think,
but that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
The only problem with Bridge is if you forget what you called it, you're in deep doo-doo. But that's okay. It's all going to work. Okay, so we're going to drag it right into Photoshop. And it brought it in to the Adobe Camera Raw editor.
Mhm.
So at this point, we can look at it and say, what do we know about it that we want to do? So tell me what you think you want to do.
Well, I really want the house to be the focal point, and the whatever those pink is that heather or whatever that is?
Whatever it is.
Yep.
You want that to show?
I want that to show leading to the old cabin or whatever that is. Yeah.
So if I'm looking at this thing, first thing I normally do is check my histogram to see if I've burned anything out, and it doesn't look like it. I would probably come in here. I don't like to touch these two unless I have to. The color tone doesn't bother me, so I don't think I need to. However, in here, you've got these profiles. So if you click on these 4 gadgets right here,
Mhm.
you'll get access to the profiles that you've got loaded into the machine. So these are some that I tend to like, and these are interpreting how Photoshop is going to see that your camera is interpreted. So these are all standard. So let's take these vintage ones. I can just run down it, and this is simulating various old stock film. It's not changing the colors in your photograph. It's just giving a wholesale interpretation of what those colors are. So that almost looks like Kodachrome. See it?
Mhm.
So I can click on that and it won't modify any of the pixels. All it does is hits an interpreter that's saying that this is how that film or that type would interpret this. So I'm looking at this and let's say this is as good a place for me as to start as any. I'm looking at this thing. These blacks here seem a little dark to me. So what I'd probably do is maybe raise the blacks. Let me see if I can do it with the shadows more. Bring those up just a little bit. And I'm doing this, and once again, I'm not messing with any of the actual pixels. All I'm doing is messing with the interpretation of them. And
Beauty of Camera Raw.
exactly. So here, if I add texture is like fine detail. clarity is like mid-tone detail, and I can just,
At what point do you think you would set your black point?
I don't really like to set my black point at about 7, but I'll do that with a curve. We know that irregardless of the color space you use, we're going to name the colors from 0 to 255.
Right.
Almost every test I've run, either on monitors or on prints, is anything below 7 is just lost anyway. So yeah, I've taken everything there and said it's going to be solid black. So I tend to like to move mine to between 7 and 10 usually to get that inkiness from appearing. And the same is true at the top. Anything above about 144, 145 is going to be white. It's just how our eyes seem to work. So that's where I use that.
Now, what does the dehaze actually do?
Well, let's look at that. So what is this doing now is it's basically, look what's happening with the histogram. So it's mitting the tones across. So it's more of a contrast that it's moving with. And I don't use it very much, to be very honest with you. Vibrance, one trick is to take your vibrance up a little far and then use your saturation to bring it back down to get your
Oh.
colors to divide out.
Huh.
So you can play with the colors there a little bit. So let's go, as long as we're here, let's go ahead and work our way through it. On this curve, so you got, your highlights, your midtones, and then your darkness, and that's these sliders down in here. So you can change this. You can change it by the colors and the parameters. And if you do it on one of these colors here, you can use these point curves, and usually I'll set them to medium. Did you see what that just did to the photograph?
Yeah.
So I tend to like the contrast I get out of a medium curve.
Yeah, I always use medium. Even in Lightroom, I use medium.
Well, this and Lightroom are exactly the same thing.
Mhm.
For those of you who are naysayers, right now I could be in Lightroom and doing exactly the same thing as I'm doing here. In details, if I'm not going to go to the DxO, I would normally sharpen. Now, this is a JPEG. That means that some engineer, probably in Japan, decided what sharpening should be. If you're shooting with RAW, you get to pick. But most things need a little bit of sharpening. I'm not seeing a lot of noise in this, but we could probably go down and look at that. So you got regular noise reduction and color noise reduction. If you're going to sharpen it, the rule of thumb is that whatever you sharpen it and whatever the noise number is should not exceed 100, which means I should be able to denoise this thing up to about here without destroying the photograph.
Hmm.
But this is not looking real noisy to me, and so I'm not going to bother.
Richard,
Yes.
on the sharpening, if you click that little triangle on the right, you get the details.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know where it had gone. All right. So this masking one is one that you really should know
That's
about.
exactly what I wanted to point out.
If I sit there and hold my Alt or Option key down and move this over, this will tell me right now it's white. That means everything in the photograph is going to be sharpened. As I move it to the side, it starts blocking stuff out.
Oh.
So if I get way over here, look, I'm just sharpening the edges of the building. See that?
Yeah.
It does that in Lightroom too.
Exactly.
Yeah, I use it in Lightroom.
Okay. So, so this here, that probably is, I could probably get rid of a lot of it. So I would probably put it there. By the way, if we do on the noise reduction has these same things, but if I hold down the Alt or Option key while I'm doing this, it turns into a black and white, and I can see how it's doing the noise. See that? Let's go up here to sharpening. I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and I'm going to move it, turn it to a black and white so I can see how much I'm sharpening it. See how I got real crunchy
Richard,
there?
in the workflow, at what point do you want to do the sharpening?
Well, you've got 3 different kinds of sharpening.
Mhm.
The first sharpening is where you're sharpening for what happens with the sensor. So that has to do with your camera and what it does. And that's part of what the DxO does for you. It does that pre-sharpening automatically. Then you have aesthetic sharpening, and you can actually put that anywhere in the process that you want to. And if you notice, like when I was doing those faces, even though I did the bulk of the editing first, they were down in and I did other things afterwards. So it doesn't really destroy the photograph. And then the last sharpening you do is output sharpening, which has to do whether it's going to go to a screen or to Facebook or to a printer. So that's where those things happen. So with all of these, by the way, you can just hold down that Alt Option key and it'll turn it to a black and white so you can see what's going on.
Now you're holding that in black and white, and yet, Richard, in some of those pine trees sort of center, I'm seeing color.
Behind the building.
Yeah, when you were holding it down and turned it into right there.
I don't
On
see
my
any.
screen-
I
on my
have no
screen-
color on mine.
I don't
Oh,
see.
I don't see color.
All
Yeah.
right, I thought I could see, I did before, maybe because it wasn't very high, but anyway, I thought I was seeing
It's
some green.
probably your eye seeing the complementary
Yeah,
color.
that's right.
Okay,
Yeah, you probably should shut your eyes for a few seconds and then reopen them
Right.
because you got residual that your eyes do for you.
okay.
All
Yeah.
right, so that's what this
Richard,
pile is.
Richard,
Yes.
I usually on the first under basic with the, I think the white and the black, I usually do the same thing with the Alt key or
to lock-
Option
so
key
you can see what you're doing.
and use the slider.
Yeah.
Do you do that? Should I do like when I first start that basic to put like I'll add my white and black, I'll hit the Alt or Option key and to see how
Well,
much if I have the too much
Now,
in the middle.
I just hit the Alt key right now. That's what I'm doing on the whites.
Right,
So I
and
got my
you,
cursor
there's
on the
not a
whites.
whole lot, yeah.
And what I'm seeing is, see, I've got those 4 red points. So I can say, well, those are real bright points. I could
Yes, so I'll
I
move
could
it,
bring those down.
right,
Or I could say, well, gee, it doesn't bother me that that's super white. It bothers me that it's super white.
yeah,
So
that's
that's how you
usually what
found
I do.
your white and dark point. So it's in
Now,
the blacks.
if you hold your shift down, Richard, and hit and double click on the word white, I think it sets it to, at least it does in Lightroom, it sets it to exactly where you're at the range of, no white, but no black either.
That doesn't seem to be working here.
Or try, okay, try double clicking with the shift key. Does it move? There, it moved to 20, or did you set it to 20?
Minus 20.
Or minus 20, so set it to something right now, double click on it. With
Double
the
click
shift
on
key held down,
which?
with the, on the line with the,
On
with the
the
shift
arrow?
key. It's hold the shift key down is what I want you to do, somewhere, either on the word white
Okay, so
there.
that jumped up to a negative
Right.
20.
Right, so now if you use your Option key and hold it down, I think you'll see that you're not seeing any white, but it sets it so that it's a 0. It's, if you moved it in some way, it would give you more white or dark, but if you use the shift key, it mechanically does it for you so that you're not into the white, like you're not getting any white. But
Okay.
it's at the, I'm trying to explain
No.
what I'm trying to say,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
it sets
for
it for
me,
you.
it
It does it
moved
for
it
the
much-
blacks too. I use it for in Lightroom, and it'll do your whites and your blacks automatically. And then if you want to do more, but it sets it so if you're using the blacks, it'll set it to that point.
Okay.
So is that better than using the slider to see where your whites disappear or where your blacks are?
Well, it automatically gives it to you perfectly, but if you want, like, I like more black, so I'll double click it and then use the Option key and usually just kick it a little bit more, but the whites, pretty good. I like it where it's not, I don't have any blown out. It won't blow it out for you.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
good to know. I
Richard,
did not know that.
I found that if I do that double click
Yeah.
on the blacks and the whites, it's a good
Yeah.
starting point. But
It
from
is.
there, what I do is I remember what my numerical settings are so that I can then use a slider to force that, if it's black, to force it toward the left so I can see where the majority of the black areas are. And conversely, when I have the white, to do the same by pushing it to the right to see where the general areas of the most overexposure are. And then, of course, knowing what the numbers are, I can go back to those points easily.
Yeah, and if you hold the shift key and then use your right arrow, it'll jump by 10. But
Yes.
if you go by just a click without the shift, it'll go by 1s.
Super. All right,
Love
let's
it.
move on down here a little bit. So I don't particularly care to do my colors here, but I can. So you can pick your colors here and begin to adjust them. The hue, saturation controls, the same things we have in Photoshop. So you said, I'm liking these reds and I want to make them less saturated. So that brings them down. I can bring them more saturated. In here, I can use the HSL sliders. That gives me another series, which basically does the same thing. So here I'm working with changing the color. Let's take that red and we can make it more red. And the alternate would be, to get rid of it, use its complementary color. You can play with the saturation. So this is that same wheel that we had in Photoshop. I just have them on 3 different sets of controls. So that would be one way we could increase these colors a little bit if we wanted to. You might say, well, gee, I think this green in here is a little too blue. So I could come here to my blues, take my saturation on my blues, and perhaps bring that down a little bit. So see in the green, the blue went away a little bit.
Yeah.
Can you pick that up? So that's what these are for. I'm not comfortable with these, so I don't do color grading here. We will do color grading in one of our sessions. Optics, I always do chromatic aberration and use the profile correction. And the profile here, if it's a raw file, it'll try
Yeah.
and find your camera and the
Mhm.
lens you used. And if it doesn't, you can kind of force that a little bit, and it makes the corrections that Adobe thinks that combination needs. So this is a place where I think DxO has it hands down. You can change your fringe if you've got color problems here. This is where that's done. Geometries for straightening buildings. So you can make some adjustments there. By the way, I just double clicked on the vertical to get it back to 0. Usually I'm going to use the vertical so that I can just adjust all that good stuff that you had before. I do not use effects in here. Things like vignetting and thing, I much prefer the style that I use where I make each one custom. Grain, we talked last time about using grain to simulate more detail when you don't have it. Calibration is probably beyond what we're trying to do here. We talked before that if you double,
Richard,
yes,
before you leave that panel, just one comment on the sharpening. You answered the question regarding the sequence of sharpening, and that is the valid answer, of course, for ACR. But when you are out of ACR, when you are Photoshop, then the sequence matters.
Yeah.
And that's an important one, because if you sharpen before you noise reduce, then
Exactly.
it's burned in.
Yep.
To the pixels. You explained the phenomenon several times, the difference. And that difference is a very important one in the answering this question.
So Bob, you said do not sharpen before you denoise.
Or denoise.
If you are in Photoshop.
Yeah,
But if
sorry,
you
in
are
Photoshop, yes, in Photoshop.
On these
in Photoshop.
sliders, Richard
Right.
answered you the question, but I want to put the qualification on it. That is only if you are on these sliders. If you are in Photoshop proper and you're using the Photoshop various functions, like every one of them, it will sharpen your noise and burn it in.
exactly. Yes. Another important point, as long as we're, kind of going down this road, the difference between ACR or any other raw editor is it doesn't matter the sequence that you do it, because it ends up with a mathematical expression of what the program is supposed to do with what it finds. So if I've done all this and then I go back up here to my basics and I decide to change the tint, that's baked in through all the instructions. Whether I did it now or did it earlier does not matter. Once you get into Photoshop, the sequence that you do things has an impact because it has to do what happens to all the layers below it. When I did the girl's face, remember, I did her eyes and then I made a new stamp visible to do my next set of sharpening on, because I wanted to include that sharpening as part of the sequence. So the sequence matters. Bob has shared with us in the past that if you double click on this down here, you can begin to tell it how you want it always to save things. So we've talked before that I like to use ProPhoto, and I like to work in 16 bits. In here, I don't have it checked to resize, but if you had some default things there, you could have it do that. But I've always got it checked down here to open in Photoshop as a smart object. That means I can always go back to my raw editor and make changes should I need to. So this is a handy one to do now. You've got all these choices, and you could set it up to either in ProPhoto, in standard sRGB, that's what the S stands for there, or in Adobe, 3 normally use. Lab color is something we'll be talking about from time to time, which is incredibly powerful. But those are the 3 you use, and I would suggest if you're not willing to go to the ProPhoto, that I would go to the Adobe RGB. Adobe RGB is what most monitors now are capable of seeing, certainly the new television sets. The sRGB is mostly for web. Make it smaller, then the Adobe RGB would probably be your best choice.
Richard, now if I went to ProPhoto, do I have to program something so that when I save it, it saves it in Adobe RGB so that other things can read it, or when I export, do whatever?
If when you save something, you embed the color thing, the embed, and you open it in a new device, all the more sophisticated devices have what's known as a lookup table. And it'll say in Adobe RGB, 111 is equal to, and it'll give it some color in lab. And then it'll transfer that lab color into whatever the actual color name is in the ProPhoto. So it does a lookup switch for switch to keep things constant.
If I had ProPhoto, if I
Yep.
changed my default to ProPhoto.
Yep.
And if I was, say, entering a competition and I had to save it as a JPEG.
Yep.
Would there be a problem with it being in ProPhoto, or do I have to tell some command to make sure that it changes it to Adobe RGB?
Theoretically, when you make that switch down, it will make those changes for you and do the lookup, especially if you've embedded the color in the file you've saved. But I have had that not work for me from time to time, so I tend to change it in Photoshop before I send it into a contest. And we can go over that again here in a few minutes.
Okay.
Okay, so I've done this, and I'm going to open it up, and so now we're in Photoshop, and it's a smart object. That means if I double click on this, I'm going to go back to Adobe Camera Raw. Right? I like the color red here. I think that works out nicely. Looks to me like we've got good color on the building. Gabrielle, what would you like to see it what would you like to see it do?
Okay, so zoom out a little bit. I think,
Okay, I'm going to hold down the alternate or the option key. It changes my magnifying glass to a negative, and now I can go out.
okay, so there's, I don't know if that's a telephone pole there on the left, or would I just crop that out? Or
This?
that, what is that? I can't even tell what that is.
Yeah, I thought it was a tree.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks,
Dead tree.
it's a
It's a
tree.
stump,
Maybe
just a
lightning.
stump.
It's a
Lightning,
tree.
yeah.
Okay, yeah,
All
well,
right, so you can do a lot of things. Just take your lasso tool.
Yeah.
And just kind of pick that, mango. Come here to edit. Clone Stamp does not like smart objects, so you rasterize that
Oh,
baby
right,
back.
right.
And see
Yeah.
how this is one of my tools.
Yeah.
So use content aware fill, and it's going to walk around and it's going to give you a sample here. Now, this is a really neat tool. Let's say that you decided that you did not want it picking up any of the color from this dead stump here. I can
Right.
just paint that out.
Yeah.
And let's say you wanted it to not pick up this black that's over here. And that'll start changing
Mhm.
the collection of what you see here.
Can you tell it where you do want?
Yes.
Okay,
So let's say I can just put down I want to say it's the Alt key. See how it changes to a plus? And I'm going
okay,
to say, I want you to pick more these colors down here, but less of these colors up in here
okay, yeah,
to
yeah,
fix that.
yeah.
So on some of them, like where you're trying to clone out and Uncle Ned's glasses gets on Aunt Martha's face, because
Right.
he's standing right next to her. You just take the green away from Uncle Harold and it doesn't pick that. So
And
see
then
how,
on the right, it's showing you what that would look like.
yeah. So it says here,
Oh,
is that what you
sure,
really
sure.
want, Bozo?
No, no, no.
Probably not. So I'm going
Mm.
to hit the blank key. I'm going to get rid of this light green. That was a mistake. Okay. And I'm going to add in, Alt key down. I want it to pick only from these pine trees. Bingo. It says, oh, that looks pretty good. So you
Right.
hit
Okay.
okay. And if you
Oh,
need to
apply
see,
first?
I'm sorry,
You have to hit apply first or okay?
just okay should do it.
Apply doesn't really seem to do anything.
No, I
Oh.
don't think it does either. So now I have a layer here that has that change on it.
Oh,
Well, let's say I want to get rid of this dead tree here. I
right.
can't clone off of this because if I go to
There's
clone here, there's nothing
Yeah.
there. I've got to go back to the picture that was, hit my lasso tool again, and now I'm going to say, I really don't like these dead trees. So I click on those on this same layer. I can leave this other one on, click up here back to edit. And this, by the way, someone asked last week, green stands out for me. I can see that easily, so I like it. It comes in, picks that out and says, yeah, is that more what you wanted? And it says, yeah, I think I do. And there they go. So now that's been taken out and I can modify that as much as I want. I can erase it here. I can stretch it. I can move it around. When I get done with these things, I can take this one here and I can just merge down. That takes the top one and puts it down on the next one. So they put them together. So now they're hooked together. Or I can merge it just into this layer here, which is my new normal.
Copy, this is the copy, right? Oh, very cool. I didn't
Okay.
realize you could merge them down like that.
Yeah. Makes life a lot easier.
Mhm.
All right. So, so I would probably say there's a lot of things here as I'm looking at this thing. Let me just,
A lot of dead trees.
Yeah.
Gee, unhealthy forest.
I know.
so you could go in here and you say, well, these are upsetting me a lot. So what I would probably do is I would just merge that sucker down myself. So now I have a corrected layer. So now what I want to do is I want to draw less attention to this. So I would probably go again, curves are your most powerful tool. So I would go to curves. I would probably try and darken it down. Didn't like that so much. Let me take this finger here. I'm going to click on these trees. And by putting that finger on there, it tells me where the color is that I'm looking at. It's right about there. So I'd like to lower that down. So see how that got everything darker?
Mhm.
You get rid of this thing here. So there, see, it just darkened it down.
Yep.
So now what I'd like to do is have it only hit these trees or more so. So one of the things, I could make a mask and try and paint them out, but this is going to make you go crazy trying to paint out all those branches.
Mhm.
So you could use a luminosity mask to try and grab them. Or you could use blend if statement that would quantify what you're going to do with this top layer and what it does on the bottom layer. So here, what I want to do is, that's doing the whites. I want to protect the darks. And so now that darkening is only happening on the leaf. See how it went away from the trees and bushes?
Oh, yeah.
And if that was too strong of a demarcation between the two, I can hold down the Alt or Option key and I can split it. So here it's saying go from 131 to 168 in luminosity and make a transition from hiding it to letting it come through. And over here, you're letting it come through. I could also make the whitest whites do the same thing. This is an incredibly powerful tool that you should spend some time and play with.
Oh, yeah. Wow, that's amazing.
Okay, so there it is. And you can tell this got this little double square on it when that's been enacted.
Oh,
So now let's turn this on and off. So look, see how it darkened my building?
hmm
I said, well, gee, I didn't really want to darken the building. Delete mask. So what I want to do now is I want to put a mask on there. And I'm going to take this tool. This is my kind of automated selection tool here. And I'm just going to wrap it around and it's going to try and find edges for me. So now it's saved the building. So what I really should do is That should be on there. I'm on here. I could use my black bucket. It should turn it on, so I can do that. My black bucket, and I can see how it just filled that in with a mask. And
Mhm.
now it's saved my building. And say, well, I missed a part. Well, I can come back and continue to paint and fix that as much as I want.
Does anybody ever just hit like the selection tool, go to edit, fill, and let the computer fill it? Because it often does a good job of getting rid of stuff. Not the content aware fill, just the fill.
Are you filling it with color? Or are you filling it with?
You're letting Adobe, you're letting Photoshop choose how it's going to fill it. It's going to, it reads stuff around it, and it seems often does a fairly good job.
It's
Maybe
always
not.
good to try it whether you like it.
Yeah, try it and see if you like it. That's right, because it's a whole lot easier and
Fewer
quicker and quicker.
It is quicker.
Mhm.
So
Those
it's
are the tools that I'm hoping my new computer will work better with.
All right, so that picked that up. So I think that worked out pretty nicely. So let's go back here and take a look at it. So we fit the screen, and so I like those trees dulled down. See how that took away from the impact of them?
Yeah,
And the
that's
building is
nice.
still bright. So that helps that work out a lot.
Yeah.
So we're looking and saying, you know, we could put any one of our things on, we can decide how it works out, but we've got a flow here. We've got a line that's started. So I wonder what would happen. Let's go up here to select and select all. I wonder if we could do something here that could make that stand out more. One of the things that could make that stand out more would be to help draw the eye along that line. So how could we do that? We could do it.
A gradient?
Well, we could do it with a gradient, but I could also do it with a contrast thing here, and I can make more contrast. See how there's more contrast now here in the reds?
Mhm.
All right, that may be a little much, but let's bring that up. So I could take that. I could take this mask and I could hit Command or Control I, and that makes it black. Then I could take a white brush, fairly large, I think pretty soft. And I would probably put my flow, let's just put it here to 30 for now. So I could say I want to catch the eye here, and I want to bring the eye to here.
Mm.
Okay, and I want more here. And so see how I got more contrasty up in here? And maybe here. So I'll add some more contrast to the farmhouse. Okay, so there's one thing leading the eye. So what does that mask look like? That's what it looks like.
Mhm.
Okay, now see here, it's grayer down here. So I didn't apply as much. And then I got brighter and brighter. So I added more and more of that contrast. Okay. So now what else? I could do the same thing with lightness. So I'm gonna go back here. Let me do a curves adjustment this time. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use this selection tool here. That these reds are, see where they are on the grid.
Mhm.
So I'm just going to raise those up a little bit. That's going to brighten them some. I'll do the same thing over here to my mask, Command or Control I. I'm going to take my same brush. Actually, I could probably use the same mask, but let's not overdo the lily here. So I'm going to take brush, it's on white. And what do I want to do? I want to lighten this a little bit. And I want to lighten it from here. So, well, gee, I think I got carried away. I'll take my opacity here. I'm going to drop that back down. Same here as with my brightness control, with my contrast control. And I think I'll do this. Oh, I want to change the opacity down. So bring that down. Yeah, so now I've got it in. See, there's a little reinforcement of that. Now,
Mhm.
and reinforce it more? Well, sure I could. Let's go up here. Let's do another curves adjustment layer. And by the way, almost everything can be translated into a curve. And what I think I'm going to do is you could pick different points on the curve if you wanted to try and set something to the midpoint. And we talked about darks. One of the way I would fix the darks is I would click on this bottom point here, and I would probably hit my up arrow a couple times. Click here. Let's move that up a little bit. So now what was 0, as I've set it to be 7. So 7 is the new 0. And what happened here is that the blacks got a little less inky. Okay. So now what I want to do is, I think what I want to do is, I can just take this, I'm going to just bring it down a little bit. I'm kind of liking what that's doing there. Isn't that fun? Wow, I like that a lot. So, and all of this is non-destructive, by the way. We haven't touched any of these original pixels down here, so we're still working non-destructively. I like that. So I'm going to go ahead. What don't I like it on? I think I'm going to paint with black. I'm going to paint with black, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to
Swap your colors, Richard.
I'm sorry.
Swap your colors.
Oh, that would work. That would make it do it better. So there we get, and do it down here a little bit. Okay. So did that give you some ideas, Gabrielle?
Yes, it did. Very much so. And I really appreciate all the different tools, because not only, you know, is it for this particular photo, but it's just the fact that there's more now tools in my toolbox for other photos that I got to see you, how you work them with this photo. So thank you very much.
Now, see, I might be tempted to try and take some of this from here because it has better detail and clone it down into here.
Yeah.
Because this red got pretty intense for me as we were working, so I kind of lost that individual detail. So I might do that more because I like that texture coming in, and I would probably crop it to get rid of some of this dead wood.
Yeah.
You know, so you know the trick here. And when I'm working this, oftentimes it'll have you click out the number of pixels, and I just blank that out so that I'm not killing any pixels. 5 by 7 is a nice number. So it goes like this. You can hit this little double arrow here. It switches them. So now you've got that to go. Bring this across. That might be a little bit more fun. So that got rid of part of my problem down here. So now, see, delete crop pixels? Don't. Because if you delete them, it throws them away. But if I leave that unchecked, then I can always go back and resize it later.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's right.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have,
Right.
so then we have the straighten tool here, which is another godsend. So you click on that, and then you can pick the line that you're going to straighten out. So that works out nicely. And then you've got this set of grids right here. That's what this little box here is for. So you click on those. So I can do triangles. So that gives you some of your layout tools right built in. Golden ratio. Golden spiral. So there it is. And this one nicely is that as you change it, the spiral changes.
Nice.
Okay, so that's what those do. And I don't see that this works out. You can change things here to your want, but that gives you pretty nice. But this is the secret one here. So let's go ahead and delete that. So enter. So now it's cropped. And I come back and says, you know, but the content says it has to be 2 by 3. Come back up here to my crop. I'm going to set this now to 2 by 3.
3 by 2. Yeah.
3 by 2. And all those pixels are still there. So
Richard, can't you just grab a corner if it's vertical and pull it down to make it horizontal? Okay, if you went up and it's, let's say you've selected a vertical alignment.
okay, yeah, like that.
Yeah, and now you say, okay, I want that to be a horizontal. Like
Yeah.
grab the left-hand corner, or okay, and pull that down. There you go.
Yeah.
I just find that's faster.
Well, see, that works, but I can always find this. But whatever works. I mean, that's the nice
Yeah.
thing about this.
Yeah,
Whatever.
whatever works.
Uh, So you got a real nice leading line here without that problem we had there. Maybe not
Mhm.
quite as much red as we wanted. And I could change this color of this dead tree up in here. So I think I've got a pretty nice photograph there. So that works nicely. And then of course you can always use that darken and highlight trick that I showed you before to make this work.
Great, thank you.
My pleasure.
It looks really different than the beginning.
This one here, I think, had an artifact on it, as I recall. That when I was working on this one, let's see, because I was in the crop tool when I left, it kept the crop tool. So I don't want to do that.
And what's the artifacts from, Richard?
Well, in here, it had to do, see this stuff
Wow.
in here?
Yeah, yeah.
This had
Yeah,
to do,
yeah.
this had to do with the blend mode that was picked on one of these layers.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Wow.
And when I came across it, I see if someone had asked me what the heck an artifact is, and there it is. It's right there. So it's on this one. And see, it was in linear light.
Right.
Oh, wow.
So that's vivid light. It's a little bit less. Hard light. Soft light, it
Soft
goes away.
light. Pretty much.
What about on overlay?
Not bad on overlay. So overlay, soft light,
Yeah.
hard light. These three are working fine. These new ones, these vividly, and these are ones that are
Yeah.
controlled with the flow valve. You know, that gives you the
Oh.
artifact. See the frog's leg down here from the sharpening? These
Yeah.
branches over in here.
Yeah.
So I just saw that and figured I really needed to show that to you.
Wow.
Yeah.
it doesn't totally disappear either.
Well, look here to soft light, it comes pretty close.
I mean, yeah, to the branch that's above the eye,
Yeah.
I can still see.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and we could go back and try and clone that out, but it's just, you know, part of what's there. And then because it's there on that
That's
bottom
from the
layer,
that's from the high pass sharpen.
this,
that what
no, that was a high pass sharpen.
That's the high pass sharpen. So
Because-
maybe if you had done it with like what happens if the high pass was, I don't know what you used to set it? Like what value did you give it?
I have no idea at this point.
Okay, so if it was a lesser value, would it be a lesser artifact?
Very well could be. But that particular, these ones down here are very aggressive.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, see, it'll build detail out of almost nothing, which is why I don't use them. And that kind of goes back to part of my philosophy with it, is I would always want did you use Photoshop to be a question as opposed to an accusation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So that's just
Analogy.
We all
so
want to be proud of it. Yes, we did use
Exactly.
Photoshop.
so, and that works fine because that to me is part of the artistic license we're
Yeah.
doing. So let's just
What
throw this.
Photoshop? It came
Yeah.
out of the camera that way.
This is, I have a camera, of course it took it, just like this.
Just like that.
So we look at it. This was obviously one of the reasons why I don't like to do birds, because they're ugly. So what I had to do, I had to begin to try and get some detail back and some lightness. That's what this curve does. Double click it, you can see the curve, and all it is a lightening curve. Okay, and then this lightens more of the bird here. See the bird itself. And then here I did the see the beak where he's eating the frog.
Yep.
So I let his face come up. That was all. This isn't my part now. What did I do there? Did anybody see it?
No.
Well, his eye.
Yeah,
You put
I
a
put-
highlight in his
I
eye.
put a catch light in his eye.
Yeah, yeah.
Doesn't take much. And by the way, as I'm zooming in, you can start seeing there are artifacts in here yet.
What did you just lighten part of his eye?
No,
Yeah,
you
but I put a-
catch light.
I just put a little white spot in his eye right there.
Yeah.
That's this one here. And so it's just the lightest of a line to catch your attention. And as we go along, you just trying to pick those things up. But what happened
Oh.
here is I added a color grade, because this was part of the series of pictures but what this is a color grade that sets colors across a series of pictures so they have something in common and so that it ties the photograph together. So instead of making it look like a horror picture or Terminator 4, which is what we think most of the things we watch on color grading is some pretty dramatic shifts in the color. These are far more subtle, and they're meant to take colors in the photograph and put them across the range of colors.
Are they
Yeah.
in Photoshop? Is the gradient editor in Photoshop?
But yes, it is a tool in Photoshop. So I'm going to double click so you can see it. So it comes up and the editor looks like that. And you can pick gradients. Photoshop comes with a whole bunch of gradients. But if you click on this, you get this editor and you can then begin to pick colors. Like here, the darks, let's say I want it really to be that dark. It changed. All of the dark tones are now going to have this influence in them.
Wow.
So over in here, let's say I wanted to pick up more of that shade of brown. Okay, so see how that brown went into the tree here a little bit? Did you see that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so now
Gotcha.
that's across this whole picture that these
Wow.
color grades have gone in there. So what it does, especially with a series of pictures, it ties them together. But in this photograph, what it's going to do is tie all of the browns so they're similar. So
Yeah.
it brings things into harmony.
Yeah.
You'd have to be careful you're not making the creature look unnatural though.
And if you, but you could also mask them out.
Okay.
See, this is an adjustment layer right here. So let me put a mask on it. Let me get a black brush, black paint. Let's go ahead and make this all the way up to the top. So now I took that color grade out of him. Now it wasn't very much on him because I used the colors in the bird as my color grade, but now they're not there anymore. I've taken them out.
Hmm.
But look at that background. Look how my background
Changed, yeah.
became more artistic because those lights started to pick up those light browns that I put in there. Remember, because I said, let's go back to this. See how the browns come almost up to the whites? That was to protect the whites in his feathers. That's why this is white. But everything else is a gradation from deep brown, so reddish brown, to kind of chocolate brown, light chocolate brown, milk chocolate brown, to kind of tan. So it just gently brings my picture up. So that's why we get those colors.
Oh, will you show that to us again sometime?
Yes, because I have a whole thing that we missed getting to do that I wanted to show you that uses this a lot. So was it useful tonight?
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Very
Yeah.
much.
Really.
Stayed with you the whole time. I can't.
Yeah, me too. You had us the whole night. And it'll be great to look at parts of the video again too, the recording.
Great.
Well, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a
Richard.
great week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Have a
Great.
great
Thank
one.
you, Richard.
Good night,
Thanks.
everybody.
Good night.
Yeah.
Bye.